Okay, good morning. Welcome to the September Coffee Connect. We're going to go ahead and start off by sharing our NeMTSS library. I do recognize that this is a recording, so you've obviously found the media library if you're watching this video, but want to encourage you to explore it a little bit farther. Don't just watch this one, explore and see what other recordings are on there and resources that you can utilize. Again, welcome to this September Coffee Connect. We're recording a little bit late, so we apologize for that. We've had a lot of travel and different things happening, so getting together as a team to record this has been a bit of a challenge, but we are here, better late than never. Our topic today is going to be behavior expectations. And I'd like to kind of start by introducing myself and the rest of my team. I am Sarah Gentry. I am the newest member to the NeMTSS Social Emotional Behavior Learning team. I cover Region 5, which is ESUs 13, 15, and 16. I'll go ahead and let Emily introduce herself, and we'll go down on my screen, I guess.
Thanks, Sarah. Emily Arkfeld, SEBL Specialist serving Region 2, ESUs 2, 3, and OPS. I'm also just going to give a plug for Mackenzie. She is just a few days away from coming back from maternity leave. She serves Region 1, ESUs 4, 5, 6, and LPS.
Perfect. I can go next. I'm Jill Gunther, Social Emotional Behavioral Learning Specialist as well, and I serve Regions 3, so that is ESUs 1, 7, and 8.
And I'm Chandra Essex. I am the SEBL Specialist for Region 4. I'm also new like Sarah, and I serve ESUs 9, 10, 11, and 17.
Okay, so we always start our presentations off with a welcoming inclusion activity. We recognize we're not live, but we would all encourage everyone watching this recording to just take a minute and kind of reflect. What number are you today? How are you feeling on a scale of inside out? And just kind of think about that, reflect, and choose a number to label your emotion. And I'm going to go ahead and challenge my team to do that too, to kind of demonstrate. So we'll start with Chandra this time.
So I would say a 5 with a little 7 who's not there, which I would say would be sleepy. So I'm happy and a little sleepy this morning.
How about you, Jill?
I'm going to go with what Chandra said. I was also saying, like, I'm feeling a little sleepy on this early morning, but also happy. I'm excited. We have a lot of fun plans coming up this weekend, so definitely there at that 5.
I'm going to go with happy too. Happy seems a little bit lower than joyful. Joyful seems like very up there. I'm not quite there. I will go with happy, and I'm going to add an 8 since 7 is already taken. And also just kind of like a contentness a little bit as well.
Cool. I will share. I think this morning I'm a little bit nervous. This is my first time presenting, and we're doing it on a recording, so a little bit nervous. I don't know if I'd go as far as scared, but so maybe that's 9. We keep adding numbers. But I'm also happy, excited to, be part of the team, be jumping in here and getting going, and got big plans for the weekend. So I'm happy and excited. Okay, another resource that we want to make sure that you guys all have access to is our Padlet link. All things SEBL Coffee Connect. You can access the recordings. You can access all sorts of other resources that we share in our Coffee Connects. The link will be posted below the video that you're watching, and the password to that, just as a reminder, is NeMTSS, all capitalized. Okay, so we're going to jump right into what is SEBL. We like to make sure that we highlight that at the beginning of all of our Coffee Connects. The definition that NeMTSS has come up with for SEBL is the systemic process of fostering social and emotional skills among students and adults. I think it's super important that we highlight adults are also included in social emotional learning. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along, but to kind of continue on in the definition, it's in order to create a safe and supportive environments with positive behavioral and mental health outcomes for all. Just a couple of things to point out about that definition. Mental health was added in Within the last year, we wanted to make sure that we included mental health because behavioral and mental health are all connected within the context of social and emotional skills. They all kind of impact each other. In a nutshell, SEBL skills are kind of the life skills that we need every day. They're teachable. They're skills that are lifelong. I'm a lifelong SEBL learner or SEB learner. And they're just all the skills that we need to navigate life and to maneuver through the world as we go on. Okay, so to kind of highlight those SEBL skills, I want to talk just a little bit about that circle and the competencies. So we recognize 5 core competencies within our social emotional behavioral learning: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationships, and social awareness. We want to kind of highlight that those skills all help support those positive expectations that we have, those universal expectations that we want to set for our schools, that structure, our overall mental health and wellness, social emotional skills kind of help highlight that, and then career readiness. And we kind of have added in and modified this slide a little bit to highlight the fact that it's kind of a back and forth relationship between social emotional skills and those other skills that we're working to adapt. So as you're learning in career readiness, you're also learning social emotional skills and vice versa. We always include our web, our social emotional skills web, to kind of help highlight those SEBL competencies, the different things that you learn within your social emotional learning, the different skills. Just a reminder, all of these skills are teachable. We can integrate all of these skills within the context of our core learning. So it's not just a thing that happens once a day. Social emotional learning happens throughout the entire day and is integrated into academic content as well. So just kind of labeling these different competencies and what they highlight. This is kind of the purpose of the web, so you can integrate it within the context of your entire day.
And I'll just jump in too, just to add, Sarah, as well, some exciting news. We are working just to kind of make some updates, some expansions, things like that to our social emotional behavioral learning competency web, and thinking about all those skills that fall within. So just kind of a coming soon plug there.
Yes, thank you. I forgot about that part. We've been working very hard on that. Okay, just kind of get you kind of thinking a little bit more about social emotional learning. We put this quote in there to kind of start thinking about behavior. The quote is, "One of the best ways to help students meet rigorous academic expectations is to first set high expectations for behavior." So one thing that we want to make sure that we encourage as we're talking, when we're thinking about behavior, we don't want to lower the standard of what behavior is for certain students. We want to make sure that we keep those expectations high, and then come in, meet the students where they're at, and give them the tools and resources that they need to meet those expectations. So I think that's an important piece that we need to highlight within the context of our conversation about behavior. And with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Thanks again, Sarah. All right, we are going to jump into our content here, talking about our school-wide expectations. I'm going to start just with that reminder that our school-wide expectations really are a part of our Tier 1 core that we put in place for all students. It helps us build that school climate and culture. It helps us, build that foundation for the work we're doing, the support we're doing for all of our students. I wanted to also share just some fidelity tools around that social emotional behavioral learning. So we have our TFI, or tiered fidelity inventory. So looking at how we're implementing PBIS and are we meeting the expectations and meeting the pieces that we need. And so we have that, we pulled out the TFI 1.3, which is behavior expectations, since that's our focus for today. And we'll talk about our 3 to 5 school-wide expectations, the matrix. And then also part of that is that, how are we going to get our staff or our stakeholder input and make sure that we're posting those in the correct specific areas. And then we have our SEBL rubric as well, which has you go through and rate if you feel you're in exploration in the areas or full implementation, somewhere along that spectrum. And so we have that up there for you as well to try to help you figure out where you are in the process, and what you might be able to do to build from there. So we have this nice flow chart. It's adapted from the PBAS Missouri Tier 1 workbook, which has a lot of great resources and steps and activities in there as you work yourself through this process. And so we're going to start really looking at that shared beliefs, that mission and vision. And so starting there, and then from that, we build our expectations, which then builds out to our matrix and our procedures and routines. And then that happens in all of our common areas across all settings and in the classroom as well. And we have some definitions up there for you as you go through this that might help just explain a little bit more of what we're talking about. So starting here with our shared beliefs and how those help impact our umbrella expectations, we want to really think about always in our SIP template, our mission and vision that we identify in there. And so making sure that our expectations tie back to that. We have up here the mission and vision of Hastings Public School. If your school or district has their own values or beliefs or things that you've already identified. So really, as we're getting our team together and we're getting started in the process, thinking about where do we want to go with this? What is our vision for what this will look like as we start implementing it, and then making sure we're thinking about while we're choosing our expectations, what are the things that tie back to our mission and vision, our climate and culture? What are we hoping to build in our school and in our district, and do our expectations align with that? So we have a couple activities there to help get your brain kind of going on that process. So moving into identifying our school-wide expectations, our umbrella expectations, why do we have these? So we know that prevention is less expensive and far less time consuming than any intervention. And so when we put these into place at that foundation, we're really focusing on that prevention. And so then our intervention and our supports for the students that need it can be far less because we've really put the work in there in our core. When we create those expectations, again, that connect to our school-wide values and our mission and our vision, we reduce our staff, our educator reactive responses to behaviors that we're seeing. It improves consistency, increases predictability, which we know is best for students. They might push back on some of that structure and boundaries and predictability, but we know really that is what is best for our kids and that they need that and they thrive in that. It helps inform our instruction and then just gives opportunity to increase those positive interactions. When we have our expectations in place and we teach to them and they are known and it becomes just that routine and those expectations, then we can fall back on them, which helps increase our positive interactions in that way. And then what are they? We've kind of gone over a few of these things, but really we want to keep them to 3 to 5 words, because if we get more than that, it's harder to remember, follow, understand all of the things. So keep it simple and concise. We base them on data and need. And so when we look at what's going, where are our hot spots in our schools? Where are our biggest behaviors? What are our biggest behaviors? It's going to be different school to school, even in the same district. And so we want to make sure when we're creating our school-wide ones specific to us, that they really fit the data and the need that we have, and that our expectations, again, match what we want to see in our buildings. They are able to be defined in terms of social emotional behavioral skills in all settings of the school. And so we want to keep them, again, clear and simple and able to be defined so that most, if not all, of our students and staff can understand what that means and what that looks like. And then again, always linked to the climate and culture of your building.
Thanks, Emily. I will start in with some examples as Emily had just laid the groundwork on what those expectations would look like and how we build those expectations. We have adapted an activity from the Missouri PBIS Tier 1 book. It talks about identifying expectations. So it is a Google Sheet that you can use. You can make a copy and use. If you'll see on the screen, anywhere there was a little arrow connected to a graphic or words, that is an active link. So you can just go to that, make a copy, and then utilize these resources for your district, for your school to best meet the needs of what's happening. So as you're thinking through what those expectation should be, this is a process that we want to make sure you understand. So this activity starts with you ask your staff to identify what are their valued behaviors and attitudes, have them list it, what resonates with them personally. Then you take their personal recommendations or what resonates with them, and then you add those up to find out what are your staff's top 5 valued behaviors and activities. There's a formula sheet on this document that can help you walk through that. Once you have your staff's top 5, so maybe those might be kind, respect, empathy, determined, maybe encouraging, integrity, polite, positive. Those may be some words that your staff may identify. Then you're going to want to take what happens in your buildings, what happens with your students, looking at what that data, that behavior data is, and determining what are those frequent student behaviors of concern and what are the expectations, those valued and attitudes that happen because of your student behaviors. So those might look like maybe attention seeking, defiance, disrespect, some of those words. So you now have what your staff have done, and you now have identified behaviors that your students have according to your data. Then you're going to want to meld those two together. So you will compare what are those data determined frequent student behaviors, what are your staff's top 5, and then you're going to look at what are those top 5 behaviors and attitudes that you need to have in your buildings to address what your staff and what the adults need as they're teaching students, and then also what your students need to address the behaviors. So a top 5 might end up resulting in looking like maybe kind, respect, safe, inclusive, responsible. And then from that, you now have a baseline of, hey, these are the 3 to 5 expectations that we want to have in our buildings, in our classrooms, everywhere, so that we can help have that guideline of where we need to be proactive in what we're doing. So once your team has identified those top 5 expectations, this is just the first step of it. So then we go into the next piece and we think about that next slide talks about, it's just a process. It's a process. So what we have here on this screen is an example of what another building has gone through in showing the different stages. So it takes stakeholder feedback is extremely important. And so this just shows maybe another example of how you do that. You'll see there's lots of writing, and that's what we want to make sure people are engaged. They are reflecting on how students and parents and community members might look through this lens and helping support what the students are doing. The next slide that we have talks a little bit about how you gain that stakeholder feedback. So your staff have been engaged and been involved, and now you know that it's a process to go through to get to that point. You've identified those for your building. However, what happens next? We can't just roll it out to our staff and students and think, hey, everybody's going to buy in and they're going to understand what this is. There's another step in that process, and that's gaining those stakeholder feedback. So you'll see on the screen and in the resources that we have a lot of different types of activities to give as examples. So maybe it is at your football game, you have a brief assessment that you want people to take as parents or as grandparents, as community members that are at your event. So put it on a QR code and have your cheerleaders hold it up. They can scan the QR code, answer your 3 to 5 questions, and then you can take that in addition, that information back. You could do a rules gallery walk where you, or a expectations gallery walk where you have that around your gymnasium of what those are. Give your students Post-it notes, have them go around and identify what it stands out to them, what is maybe not as impactful for them, thinking through that. For your family, sharing those copies, sending it home in those folders for that you go home with your students every day, at parent-teacher conferences, having drafts in the offices when they pick up. And then thinking about too, your community. So we've talked about maybe at a public event, so maybe at an athletic event or a musical, a theater event, but also how are you engaging not only your parents and events and folks that come to your events, but maybe also your board of education, nonprofit leaders in the community, your hospitals, your medical providers. Those are entities that are also dealing with our students on a daily basis sometimes. And so they can help see and give feedback to make sure that we really have engaged everybody in this process. As we know, when you're engaged in a process, it's much easier to buy in and support to what's happening if you've had an opportunity to share your voice. So that is a part of what we're wanting to try to do. So you'll see an example of what some schools have come up with based on their school-wide expectations. So, hey, Spring Hawks, they soar, they're going to show pride, own it, act positively, and respect all. The Viking life, hashtag, we love hashtags, so hashtag the Vike life, be respectful, be responsible, be safe. So Plainsman pride, again, going with that pride and breaking down. So it's, again, very short snippets of words that align with your school-wide expectations. They align with your mission and vision in your buildings and your district, and you market it in a way that becomes a part of the culture. So really thinking about what are those, what's your mascot? What are your colors? What's an easy way to break it down that not only your students and your staff and your adults in your building know, but also your community members, that it can roll off their tongue so that they can, again, it's a very wide breadth across who is able to help support it and explain what's happening. And it really then becomes not only a culture in your buildings, but in your communities to really help support them. And I'll turn it over to Jill.
Awesome. Thanks, Chandra. All right, so Emily did a fantastic job just kind of really explaining this diagram that we've kind of adapted just to kind of help guide that understanding of just kind of the layers of behavior expectations and really establishing those. And so we're just going to dig just a little bit into what you see circled there. So the social, emotional, and behavioral skills matrix. And again, this is just kind of that broad overview of providing just a little information kind of throughout our time together today. I do want to draw your attention to just that terminology that Emily had mentioned before. We really kind of wanted just to kind of define some of those pieces there as well. So again, we're going to be really taking a look at behavior skills. So really those specific tasks or the skills that students should be able to do or to use in order to achieve those school-wide expectations. We also have linked on this slide just kind of a resource that you guys can go back to as well. So just kind of that question of what is social, emotional, and behavioral skills matrix? So what is an SEB skills matrix? So it is a tool for teachers to be able to really communicate the expectations for all areas of the building, what that looks like, what that sounds like. It should be posted really in all of those environments. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And when we're thinking about what is this matrix, it should really just be an effective way for teachers to set students up for success. So a way for teachers to really give those pre-corrects to their students. So a couple examples there. What does that look like? What does that sound like? Maybe it's time to transition to the media center. It's library day. Really using that matrix to set students up for success and to be able to review those expectations prior to going to the media center. Maybe it's an all-school assembly, something like a pep rally, and really being able to review those expectations prior to that event, prior to that transition. So just kind of some things to think about when we're thinking about what is the purpose, what is the why for an SEB skills matrix. And the other just kind of important piece to remember is that anything we add to that matrix is really something that we feel is important enough that we're really committing to teaching. Okay. Also, just kind of a question there, our SEB skills matrix really answers the question of what do these things look like? What does respect? What does responsibility? What does best effort look like in the different settings? So what does that look like in the hallways? What does that look like in the cafeteria? And things like that. So just some things to think about as you're preparing that process of behavior expectations and then moving into your matrix. We also have an activity for you guys just to kind of help support what that could look like. And so this creating matrix activity can be something that you could do with your staff. Now, again, it might look very different just kind of depending on the size of your school. Please feel free, any of these activities that we're sharing with you guys as a resource to come back to can be adapted, modified, changed to meet your needs. If you're thinking about this activity for maybe a little bit larger school or district, it might look like having groups of teachers in their PLCs or in their grade level or in their content area PLCs going through this activity or through this process. For a smaller district, it might be something that you're able to accomplish all together with the staff during like a staff development or professional development day. So again, just kind of taking a look at the steps of creating that matrix activity. You can have some chart paper, have it hanging around the room, and then by the expectations. So let's say that be safe, be respectful, be responsible. We would have a piece of chart paper for each of those for all settings and then for common areas. When we're thinking about common areas, we also have just kind of a little visual for you guys. Again, you may not use or have all of these different common areas, but just some ideas to get you thinking about that. So things like restrooms, the cafeteria, maybe it's the computer lab, maybe it's the front office area, maybe they're in the media center, things like that. So lots of different possible common areas that you might identify. Then you're going to have each of your staff members just on separate Post-it notes, separate sticky notes, being able to write one behavior skill on those Post-it notes and putting it on that chart paper for those expectations. And then you're going to go through, just go ahead and eliminate any of the duplicates that you might have as the groups are completing the activity, and then coming to that consensus of 1 to 3 SEB skills. Okay, so again, just an idea of an activity that you could do with your staff, adjust as you see fit to meet your needs. The other piece, as you're thinking about this process, we always want to come back to what does the data say? We're especially here really referencing that Nebraska NeMTSS essential element of that database decision making. We always want to ensure that we're really coming back to our data. We're using it to guide our decision making. Using your student information system, whatever you're using to collect that data, taking a look at that, taking a look at your referrals, taking a look at your perceptual data, and what does it say in terms of what are your hotspot locations, what are your hotspot behaviors that we need to have some conversations around, and really helping that to guide your decisions there. This is just a nice chart when we're thinking about what are some guidelines as we're working to define our expectations. And I do want to point out that we circled that observable and that measurable. So those first couple there. And that's really just because obviously we want all of those pieces to be observable, to be measurable. But as we really work to embed and integrate social, emotional, and behavioral skills within our matrix, some of those are just a little bit harder and not always as observable or as measurable as behavior skills might be. So sometimes it can be difficult to measure, observe thoughts, feelings, things like that. So we did just kind of want to point that out as we're thinking about those guidelines for defining expectations. But this chart just does a really nice job of having some examples, some non-examples of what that could look like as you're going through the process with your teams. If we're thinking about positively stated, so we want to say things like hands and feet to self rather than no fighting. We want it to be understandable. So really thinking about that vocabulary that we're using, its age and grade appropriate. We always want it to be applicable so that we're able to consistently enforce it. And then we want to be respectful of the students' community, and really thinking about all of our stakeholders involved as well, right? Our students, our parents, our caregivers, community as a whole. And so just really kind of evaluating and taking a look at all of those pieces when we're defining our expectations. This is just a nice chart and another great resource for you guys to come back to. You know that we always like to inundate with you in all of the different resources. Just hopefully you guys can come back to those and take a look for just further information. And so this teaching social emotional competencies within a PBIS framework is a great one. This example that you see here actually comes from that resource. But it's just a nice way to really show the school-wide expectations and then how we are working to incorporate those social emotional skills. So like for responsible, you see just our arrows pointing out there that use my breathing technique. Safe, being aware of my body. And so just really thinking about how we can integrate and incorporate those social emotional skills within our school-wide expectations, and what that can look like. The most important piece there, just really being intentional, and we really want our staff to be modeling that in our language for our students as well. And really calling out those social, emotional, behavioral learning skills within there. This is also a nice chart. Again, something that you can come back to, but it really outlines each of the SEBL competencies. So we have our self-management, responsible decision-making, self-awareness, relationship skills, and social awareness there. And then it just does a nice job of having like a matrix expectation and then that corresponding statement that really helps us to make those connections to the competencies. So you can see just a few different examples there. So self-management, thinking about the listening. So when we listen quietly, we use our self-management skills. So really having that awareness first and then moving into some of those self-management strategies. So this is just something you could build from, a great tool for teachers to, again, really kind of identify and being able to pull some of that language as we're thinking about how can we model and how can we talk about some of those SEL skills when we're teaching behavior. Another great one, so teaching matrix here. Again, just want to give you guys some examples to just kind of take a look at, but really prompting staff. The biggest piece here is having that common language. The more times that students are seeing and hearing, staff be able to model and really talk about those skills, the better. So for those skills really to be used on a regular basis, we want all of our staff members to really be modeling, to really be teaching and reteaching, prompting and acknowledging across all of the settings in the school. And this just really helps to be able to accomplish that. So this, again, just kind of pointing out the social skills, those behavior examples, and then within those natural contexts. So again, just kind of a nice visual to get us thinking about what that could look like. Some other examples here. So we have a matrix where it just is outlining those expectations. So here we have be safe, be responsible, and be respectful. And then what that looks like in some of the different areas. So all the way from what does that look like at the lockers? What does that look like at dismissal? What does that look like in the restroom? And then just a way that this particular district went on to really brand and put together that information in their posters that they could hang up throughout the school. So going back to that, teachers and just all educators and students being able to use that common language and really just kind of that all in. So really embedding it within your culture of the school as well. And so that is just one example. And then we have one other one. So this one, the expectations of accept responsibility, being respectful of self, surroundings, and others, and then exhibiting kindness and showing appreciation. And again, just going on to define that in some of the different areas. So they have things like the parking lot, some different sporting events, what that looks like in the restroom for each of those expectations as well. This is a template. Again, we have it linked on the page, so you're able to just do like a forced copy of this, just to kind of give you a starting place. Again, adapt, modify to fit your needs, but this is something that you could use to just kind of as a starting point as we're working through that behavior matrix. So lots of pieces that you really will want to consider. And again, like we said earlier, this is really just kind of a dip your toes in the water. Quick little overview. We would encourage you to really take a look at our SEBL suggested roadmap for some other trainings for additional information as well. But as we're thinking about this SEB skills matrix, you'll want to really use your umbrella values and identify those settings, those locations that you'll want to address. And again, based on your data, what are those hotspot locations? What are those hotspot behaviors? What is the data telling you? Emily mentioned some of those reminders as we're really working through this process, but we really want to stick with like 3 to 5. Sometimes less is more, right? And when we're thinking about the settings, our recommendation would be no more than 10 settings. So obviously you have lots of different settings throughout your school, but you don't want to have so many where it's almost overwhelming, right? Just pick a few to kind of start with, and you can always expand. But really, again, coming back to your data, what is being strategic really about those hotspot locations? And then we really want to focus on what to do, not what not to do. We want to identify those kind of missing skill areas. So that's where it really comes back to those SEL skills and how we're really incorporating SEBL, how we're really having that integration. So if your team has identified defiance as kind of your number one concern based on data, we really want to see maybe following directions throughout the matrix in each of the different areas. And so just kind of as you're going through this process, again, just kind of something to help you guys organize your thoughts and discussions within your team. From here, as you kind of have a draft, then like Chandra was talking about earlier with gaining just kind of some of that stakeholder feedback, such an important piece that can be done through that same process with your matrix. So kind of having a draft there based on your data and then gaining that feedback from there. Next up, we just have a few examples that we wanted to share with you as well. Just some different ways where it can really just be part of what you do each and every day, right? How do we really integrate these into our climate, into our culture, so that all of our stakeholders, community members, parents, caregivers all really know what this means for our school. So I'll just point out a couple of these, and then I'm going to have the rest of our team kind of talk about some of the other pieces as well. So we have one, it's actually from Tower School out of Wayne, Nebraska. They have the Tower Way, and they have this on shirts for the staff. The students have the shirts for be safe, be respectful, be accepting, and be an advocate. And then they have those defined all throughout their building. I also have a little video that we want to share with you. It comes from Walt Hill, but I'm going to let my other team members talk about some of the other examples as well.
I'll go. I think I'm talking about the Avery Elementary one. And so they have all of their like common area posters in the area. And then on the bottom of each, they have a QR code, and the QR code will take you to this video that is for that specific area. So this one is a bathroom. And so they have their mascot. They're the Avery Tigers. And so it goes through each of like the pieces of the expectations within that specific setting. And so it's a fun way for the kids to see it. It's a fun reminder for staff, community, if they're coming in, they can see that. So got, the mascot involved, like Chandra was referring to before.
So I would,
go ahead.
So I will say that I'll just touch on like the Ainsworth Middle School. They have the 3 R's, and this is a banner when they first come in. Respect yourself, respect others, and respect your school. So thinking about that, maybe through banners, at your sporting events, again, having those on your programs, musical theater events. And then we also talked to as a group, with our kiddos when they're coming home from a parent perspective. I know that my daughter's school has
entering the bathroom. He's wearing his mask. He's going to go in.
School-wide expectations, but we want to make sure that there's different ways that you're sending that home. And so on like my daughter's folder that we pull things out of every day, that might be an easy place to put those expectations. So just thinking about fun different ways to do that.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of just jump in and kind of share a little bit about that too. Our other example that we have in the corner from Cottonwood School, and I'm going to say Aguanga, California. Not really sure how to say that. This is an example of the expectations and behavior matrix being shared within the school planners. So my kids in elementary school brought their planner home every day, and mom had to sign it. So just kind of engaging parent stakeholders and making sure that those expectations and those kinds of things are being sent home every day where parents can review it. The other one looks like maybe it's part on a calendar too. I'm not really sure. But one thing we wanted to highlight is the importance of making sure that you get those expectations out there within your community, within the school. We've seen other examples of where at basketball games, football games, maybe in the folder on the programs that show all the kids, the teams, maybe you have your expectations printed on there. In announcements, I've heard in different sporting events where they're introducing the teams, they also share the expectations, behavioral expectations for that school. So it becomes more of just a everyday during school time, it becomes a culture and climate thing, and community stakeholders are then engaged. Another platform, and we didn't bring any examples in, but social media, sharing these things out on social media, it's another great resource and tool that you can utilize. The Walt Hill Elementary video that Chandra's going to share, or Jill's going to share here and talk about in a minute, a great example of something you can do with social media. So go ahead, Jill, you can talk about that more.
Perfect. Well, let's see if we can get it to play for you guys. Let me see here. Oh, should have definitely tested that out before. I apologize. Okay, so we're not going to be able to share with you guys that video, but we would encourage you. We will get that adjusted so that you guys are able to go in and watch that, because that is a great video of just kind of some of the things that we just talked about. And what that can look like as well. So we will be sure to get that adjusted so that you're able to go back and view that.
And what we have here is just another resource that comes from
entering the bathroom. He's wearing his mask. He's going to go in.
Our team. That comes from Heather Robin. She has created a number of 10-minute tidbits. And so she has one that is around the SEL behavior connection. And so it's just quick tidbits, So again, we want to just make sure that as you dip your toe in the water through this Coffee Connect, that you have a variety of different resources. And this is a great piece that maybe you could show at a staff meeting, you could show at a PLC, you could show or you could share in short segments. And there's a variety of other 10-minute tidbits that we have that are out there, so that are on our media library on the website.
And welcome to the Nebraska.
So this wraps up our September Coffee Connect. We know it's a little bit late, but we would just love to hear your feedback. And so if you could click on the exit ticket link, which will be in the PDF of the slides, which you can find in the notes part of this recording, and give us some feedback, that we would just appreciate. We really are excited to have you join us for this Coffee Connect. And then just remind you that our next Coffee Connect will be on October 25th, and it is on discipline and policies and practices.
And I'll just add to that as well. We always like to remind you, if you do want a certificate of attendance for these, that is within the exit ticket as well. So you can complete that.
So we have, this is our slide, and you can see there's a QR code at the top for our remainder of our Coffee Connects for this fall. So we have October 25th, November 29th, and December 13th. Just some great opportunities to just join us and learn a little bit on different SEBL components. October 25th, like I said, is our next one. So we hope to see you that morning. And then our optimistic closure for today, we just want you to take a minute and personally reflect what resonated with you based on the information that was shared. What may be additional questions you might have after what's resonated with you, and feel free to reach out to any of us on the SEBL team or your regional teams to see what ways we can help support you. But this is just a great personal time to reflect on what has resonated you with the information we've given you today. Here is our upcoming slide, our upcoming trainings that we have. I think Jill mentioned that our roadmap. So we have a variety of different trainings that are happening this October. We are starting with our school-wide part 1. We have additional Coffee Connect, and then we have our school-wide part 2 in November, a Coffee Connect, and our tier 1 classroom. So, and if you have seen our roadmap, it has a variety of different presentations and opportunities for you to gain information to meet you where you're at in your school districts. And next week, we hope that you are joining us for the NeMTSS Summit in Kearney, October 12th and 13th. So it's at Eunice Conference Center, the North Conference Center, and we're excited to see you all there. This is additional resources for evidence-based strategies series. Again, just nice information that you can use in guiding you through that targeted improvement planning process. So our part 1 is a crash course, part 2 is a staff rollout, part 3 is classroom implementation, and part 4 is that database decision making. So again, aligning with our essential elements for NeMTSS and giving you an opportunity for additional information. And this is just a reminder of who our team is. We are all here to support you in your implementations in your buildings, with your staff, with your students, your stakeholders. So please feel free to reach out to us. Here's our contact information. You can also click on the link below and go to our website to find out who are your regional teams and contact information there. So we just want to thank you for joining us today, and hope that you have a great rest of your week and weekend, depending upon when you're watching this. And we will see you next time in October.